mentioning some of the furniture from the set.
Yeah, so there's wicker chairs on the set, and those belong to my grandmother, and they were kind of the only thing she had when she was living with my mom and dad. And so they're like 150 years old or something. But they were something that was always in my house growing up. For some reason, there wasn't enough space, so they used to keep them in the dining room. So that's what we do. The radio is actually the radio from my house growing up when I was a kid in the kitchen. That's the kitchen radio that I used to listen to my father on. That every school report, every snow day we had, every hit I ever heard came from that actual radio. And mom and dad got a new one. I was like, oh, don't throw that out. Let me keep it. Bit of a pack rat for a bit sentimental, as you can tell. And so anyway, so there's lots of stuff in the house that is actually from the house. Real family photos on the walls and stuff. Just to kind of, so it's kind of weird sometimes sitting at the kitchen table and I can look at the radio that was in my house growing up and the wicker chairs at my house growing up, and the house looks like the house I lived in growing up. So it's it can get a bit surreal sometimes, or kind of like you're in a dream.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this is your story. This is your childhood. But then a lot of it is sort of fictionalized and so on, just for storytelling.
The spine of every story is true. Like, we're doing one about when I nearly drowned. We're doing one about the time I was 15 and performed at a bar and my father caught me. So every episode is a real story from my life, and then you just kind of expand it and change it a bit, because a lot of these stories might have happened when I was 9 or when I was 17, but we're putting in these couple of years. So a lot of things change, and then you fictionalize things, to whatever, and different alternate storylines. But the heart of every story is true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And the house is it very close to your house growing up?
It's bigger than my house growing up, but the floor plan is the same, and the kind of archways into the dining room and everything, it looks like the house, except there was no, between the living room and the kitchen, just to open up the space a bit, they cut a big hole. There's a kind of window between the two rooms. We didn't have one of those. Everything else is pretty much the same, except it's about half the size.
Right, yeah. And I noticed, I was walking through the props warehouse.
Yes.
And the collection they have is just amazing, because it takes place in the 80s and I guess early 90s, and so everything has to look authentic.
Bit of a flea market. Yeah, everything is real. We either find it or we make it. So in this set, you see right here is a board from a radio station, right? So you fade up, some fade out. First 2 seasons, we shot this location, the radio station, on location at BOWR, which is a really old radio station here. Kind of charity run. It's a church radio station. And a lot of their gear is donated stuff from other radio stations, including VOCM, the station my dad worked on. So that's the actual board from VOCM that was donated to the church radio station that my dad was produced from.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's one of his mic flags, the VOCM one from back in the day. So there's lots of real stuff around, lots of ghosts for me.
yeah, I can imagine it probably gives you some deja vu from time to time.
It's just kind of neat to have, real things and real knobs and things like this. Like, I spend a lot of time in radio stations. My brother works in radio to this day. And so, like, cart machines, any radio guy, these cart racks, right? So they'd have sound effects or ads or something. So they'd, pop one of these in, and then you'd have your ad. So it'd be like, coming up now on VOCM, we're going to have a word from Call's Funeral Home. Call's Funeral Home, always there at Cole's Funeral Home. So, it's real tactile, real stuff in those days. Which I love that analog kind of vibe.
And do you get to sort of play a role in picking some of the locations that you film at outside?
Yeah, I'm an executive producer on the show as well. So, tech surveys, location scouts, all that stuff. We do all that. I'll often have a location in mind too, like, for something like, it was like this, but can we do it here, or give an idea of what else. Like, we just shot in an old mall. It's kind of a strip mall that was empty, and we went in there. We made all new storefronts. We put in a video arcade, and this was the mall that a couple of scenes happened in, and that was a lot of fun putting together a video game arcade. So to get all the games, source them. The guys designed it. It just looked phenomenal. And you walk through this thing. It's like a mall from the 80s, So it's kind of neat to do that. You kind of, to do something like that, then you have to, with your budget, you have to earn it somewhere else, right? So you go big in this episode with that set, then that means another episode you got to stay in the house as much as you can, like stay in the location or the radio station, right?
Right.
So if you have a big one, you kind of have to have two easy ones, right? Because you have to spread out your money.
Right. So you can focus the budget on one episode and go bigger.
Go bigger on that one or other little elements, right? And so and plus we have a lot of dream sequences, so we get to play with those where Mark kind of fantasizes. And I guess you saw the Star Trek Enterprise they're building.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's going to be fantastic. And the funny thing with that is, so we put that in. We had to get Paramount to sign off on that, and they'll let us use the actual uniforms or whatever. And then the guy, Mark Steele, who's a production designer, was production designer for Star Trek Discovery. So he's had multi-million-dollar Star Trek budgets to make an actual spaceship,
right?
An actual, starship. And then with us, it's like, can you do a cheap version of the Enterprise? It's like 100% because it was cheap when they made it, the original, right?
Yeah.
So we got a good guy making that.
Nice.
It's pretty cool. We made the Reach for the Top set as well this year, which was I don't know if you know, there's a trivia game between high school students that was aired on CBC.
Okay.
So we recreated their set as well this year, and a TV studio set. So getting all those, and we had to bring in like vintage TV cameras, big cameras rented from somewhere and had them shipped here. So detail and being really adhering to making things real and look real and right is tough as a challenge, but it's, you just hear the comments from people. People love it when you take the time and they can spot something that adds their nostalgia.
Yeah, and I imagine for people in St. John's, the show probably hits home because they grew up here and they were around these things. And
100%, like all this stuff, like brands, songs, the station, like it's much heightened. Like we could have made up a radio station, but the fact that Dad was such a well-known figure in radio here, it would just seem so silly to anyone from here watching if we were a different radio station.
Right.
So we had to get those guys to sign off, so that was tough. But then we had to use their real logo, VOCM.
Okay, it's built right in there. Yeah. And you went to St. Pierre to film as well, right?
That was amazing. People there were great, and that was, difficult because it's another country and it's traveling your main cast and stuff. But we made it work, and that was something we could have faked. And I was like, I don't want to fake it. I want to, let's say we actually went,
Yeah.
So we did, and it was tough for us. We had like move company days off and stuff to give us travel time and stuff. But it all worked out. We had a great group of people, and they can make anything happen. And it was so neat to actually shoot there. I mean, you can feel it. You can tell. There's a more European feel there. So
yeah, I think if it had been faked, people would have picked that out. Maybe.
Yeah, you look cheap.
Yeah.
Two things we have to spend on is like prop and set details and music. Like to have the real songs. So if we're gonna have a song, we'll spend a lot of money on getting Dean Martin or getting the Beach Boys or getting whatever. And it's more difficult, but I think it enriches the whole show, and it makes the experience of watching it. You envelop into it more. Like I there's nothing I would hate in a lot of Canadian shows. It's the Rock and Rollers with the new hit Blue Jean Rock. It's like that's not a real song. So I love it when you can actually hear a song. Plus we have an incredible score from Alan Doyle and Keith Power. But when you have one of these needle drop radio hits, it really gives you the time.
Yeah, that really puts you in the time frame.
Yeah.
Like hearing, Roxette or Patio Lanterns or something. Yeah, those are great. And then one other thing that I'd noticed, my hometown, Ottawa, you went and filmed at the Diefenbacher.
We went from Diefenbacher. My dad had shot in Greenland and stuff. Dad worked in Greenland during the war, as well as Goose Bay and different places. And so I wanted to show that side of things, and he worked at this kind of secret underground base where they were putting in nukes under the polar ice cap in Greenland. And I thought, Diefenbacher, a place I always wanted to go, but that will give us a look. It's one-stop shopping.
Yeah.
So we contacted those folks. They were great. We did another scene. One of the St. Pierre scenes was shot in Little Museum, outside Little Museum there, flashback, next to the Chateau Laurier. There's this little
the Bytown Museum.
Yeah.
Like down on the locks by the canal. Yeah.
And so we use that as an exterior, and it looked like $1 million.
Yeah.
So like, you know, you go somewhere, you've always got to try and get two things, or with locations, as you know, it's all about grouping things, right? So if we're going to go, it's expensive to leave the studio.
Right.
So you want to be able to set up a thing and shoot a couple things in that area and then move back again. So everything has to be coupled with something else.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.